Welcome everyone to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. If you're joining us for the first time and you don't know anything about us, we are Britain's largest pro-marriage organisation. We represent groups and individuals who support the definition of marriage as one man and one woman. And that's not to say that other things don't exist in a liberal democracy. It's just that we believe marriage is something completely unique that only one man and one woman can do. And in the definition of marriage, of course, that concept of one biological man and one biological woman is very important. And our guests today have had that come up in their lives. It's a privilege to welcome Nigel and Sally Rowe. Nigel and Sally, would you like to say hello?
Hello,
yeah, thank you for having us.
And I wonder if you'd take a few moments just to let our viewers know the background to why you've been in the news over the last couple of years, and also to why more recently, the last week or so, you've been in the news again.
To cut a long story short, when our children were at the Church of England school, the school began to, I would say, endorse transgender ideology within the school. Specifically, there were two children that were wanting to identify in the opposite sex. They say in the media, you know, they wanted to wear dresses, but it actually was a bit more than that. They were identifying as the opposite sex. And we had an issue with that. And so we challenged the school. The ramifications of the challenge in the school was a rather draconian, harsh letter. And in that letter, specifically something that really was sad and challenging, I think, was when they said that if our 6-year-old son was not able to recognize the other child as being a literal boy or a little girl, that our son would be deemed transphobic, and the parents too would also be deemed transphobic. And to be honest, that kind of letter from a Church of England school, I'm sorry, we just felt was unacceptable. And so therefore what we did was we contacted the Christian Legal Centre and asked them what they thought of it. And they were fantastic. They said, well, it's not ethical, it's not legal, and it's not moral.
Nigel, let me just clarify that. Your son was 6 years old.
6,
yeah?
Yes.
6 years. And he was in a school and another boy came in wearing a dress.
That's right.
And he questioned it. What's going on?
The boy wearing a dress announced that they were now no longer a boy and going to identify as a girl. So the way, how it happened, in fact, it happened twice in the school, both when my sons were 6, but it was the second time when I got home and my 6-year-old said to me when I was putting to bed, said, yeah, I don't understand, I'm confused. I thought we had boys and we have girls, but my friend at school is now become a girl. So can boys become girls? I said, no, son, we have boys and we have girls. We have mummy, we have daddy, and we're different, but we complement each other.
As I've mentioned to you, Coalition for Marriage has supporters from all faiths and none. A wide range of people join us because they believe in that definition of marriage being one man and one woman. And I think there were a lot of our supporters most of our supporters, I dare say, who even don't identify as Christian would still have a problem with the fact that a 6-year-old can just come along and say, I'm now a different sex, and that you would be deemed transphobic if you dared to even question that and do anything other than affirm it. So let's go on and establish the facts a little bit further then. So that took place 4 years ago?
In 2017, yes.
Okay.
Half years ago.
Yes. Right. So what's happened recently such that it's in the news again?
Well, over the last 4.5 years, evidence has been collated from experts such as endocrinologists and psychologists who have said actually that affirming children of that age is very dangerous. You can affirm a child to believe anything because children are very vulnerable mentally. And so the evidence was overwhelming, but this evidence obviously has taken 4.5 years. And then the Christian Legal Centre then decided to submit that to the High Court. And then for the High Court to hopefully challenge this ideology being pushed or endorsed within the school system.
So your argument or your beef, if you like, is with the Department of Education?
Yes. That's right. In fact, they contacted the Department of Education first and submitted the evidence and said the guidelines that you are promoting as best practice, which promotes transgenderism in primary schools. This evidence says that this is harmful. These guidelines are harmful. You promote it, it could lead to a lot of damage.
Mm.
The education department decided not to use their powers to do anything, and then that's why it then got submitted to High Court. It first was rejected, but we were able to appeal, and we've had success. So it will proceed on mainly 2 grounds: that what is education, and to look at the evidence, because they really haven't actually taken that on board. They had the government did not deny the evidence, but they didn't. Well, they didn't say the evidence.
They didn't seem to really acknowledge it.
They didn't really acknowledge the evidence at all. And I think the judge realised that actually the evidence is really powerful and overwhelming, and it needs to be looked at and considered.
Right. So you've got a judicial review in train that will look at the veracity of these things being shared in school with children as young as 6, and to see whether in fact it does more harm than good. Have I ever summarised that correctly?
That's correct.
Yes, that's right.
And when will that be concluded, do you know?
I think in about 3 months' time.
Okay, so quite soon.
Yeah.
Very interesting, because of course I think there was at the time of recording, just in the last couple of days, there was a release by the Department for Education in England reminding schools that they need to be subjective in what they teach, and it gave a specific emphasis on race. Didn't talk about sexuality and gender. Teachers need to be objective in terms of what they're sharing with the children. Absolutely right. So this is some years ago now, so you're kind of constantly living through it. How did it make you feel? How did it make your 6-year-old son feel?
I think I'll start with, how did it make us feel? I felt frustrated, and maybe exasperated is another word, that I just couldn't believe that many in the culture, being teachers and parents, even the Department of Education, could really believe in this type of ideology, that little boys, little girls from the age of 4 could really work out these things. And is it really right that we push this sort of stuff within a primary school? In fact, with regards to our sons, I think I'll let Sally ask that question. How do you feel it affected our sons?
Well, firstly, I mean, when they did come home, I was kind of almost devastated. I want to protect my children and let them be children for as long as possible. That's such a gift to have a child, you know, that childlike innocence, and come face to face with transgenderism. Or, you know, and gender confusion. It was something I didn't even want to have to discuss with my children at that stage. So I was upset, and it has affected our boys in that our oldest became more and more upset and stressed about going into school. I think this was for a variety of reasons, but this was, I think a lot of it was that the Church of England was in contention with our Christian beliefs, which was interesting, because we're like, you're Christians and we're going to a church school. When there was this child identifying in the opposite gender, they both came home questioning, can a boy marry a boy? Can a man marry a man? Can a woman marry a woman? So it raised all these questions. When
they go to a school, a secular school obviously especially, they're taught values which are very different to what our values would be. But the tragedy of this was they were going to a Church of England school. And you would expect a Church of England school to be upholding biblical values. And sadly, that's not being the case, because they're no longer standing on something that is so foundational. You know, the family. Even if you wanted to bring it into other faiths, the family is the foundation of society. It's foundational. If you get the family right, you know, mum, dad, kids, get that system right, you'll find that the culture will blossom and it grows and it works well.
I think you're right in the sense that anyone, I'm guessing, or the vast majority of reasonable, ordinary people whose 6-year-old came home to them and said, there's a boy in my class who has now become a girl, is that possible? Would have questions and would not just blanketly affirm it to their 6-year-old son. I don't think you're alone or were unreasonable. And it seems to me for the school to have said, look, unless you affirm this change, you are transphobes. You know, the idea of a transphobe is somebody who hates and fears. Well, I'm sure in my little knowledge of you, you don't have the capacity to hate and fear many individuals, let alone a whole group of of individuals identified in a certain way. As I understand it, you're homeschooling now, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you took them out of the education system, which again is a sad thing to have had to do, really.
Yeah, it's a sad thing to do, but on reflection of it, again, one of the issues we can see within the school system that is not teaching our Judeo-Christian values anymore. I mean, our culture was built on that. And now that's just being completely eroded away. It causes stress because when a child then goes to school, he sees a different, if you like, theology being taught to him. And he kind of goes, well, I'm at home, mum and dad have said that marriage is between a man and a woman. But I go to school and we're being taught that men can marry and women can marry. I'm confused. They don't get it. And, I mean, children are quite intuitive. They can see that there is a difference between men and female. It's obvious, not just mentally, but also physically. Children can see that.
I'd like to unpack a couple of things just to help our listeners think through it, if you like, while you're thinking through it. But first of all, what are your thoughts for the young lad, if you like, who was coming in an address, and maybe the parents of that young lad? It's difficult to know how to respond to them in a loving and kind way, yet affirming what you believe is true and right. What are your thoughts around that?
We've always said that if a child is confused, then they need that care and help. But it's not the best thing to do in a school environment, because not only for the sake of the other children, but also that child in question. They actually need help, and there's usually lots of good reasons why that child is confused. And if they can have that one-to-one care and help, and we can talk to them, and they can find out, so like an expert psychologist, for example, who in that field can talk to them, and they can find out the root cause of that confusion. Often it can be ironed out, or they can be walked through it for a while if that's the case. I think our issue was that it was just, there was no consultation, there was nothing, and even the school said, I can quote, they said, the school does not require any formal medical or psychological assessment and reporting when a pupil seeks to be treated as transgendered or in exploring their gender. And so that was really concerning, because we know from all this evidence that we've collated, and Dr. McHugh, who is Professor of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, he worked with children like this. They went down the medical route. He saw that it didn't work, and he says policies which affirm a child in their gender confusion without requiring psychological evidence are highly damaging to the children involved. So we have compassion for that child. We just could see that this was not the right way to go about it.
And let's I suppose as well kind of explore this thing. Children are different, and as they grow up, we have different traits, we have different preferences, and some of those traits and preferences might be identified as more commonly associated or stronger in females and or in males. That doesn't necessarily make you a member of the opposite gender.
No, certainly.
I think the word we're looking for is there is a spectrum, isn't there? I mean, I remember when I was at school, we'd have some boys, I went to an all-boys school, but I remember some boys were very masculine, and some boys were slightly more effeminate, they were slightly more feminine. But there was a spectrum, but it didn't mean that just the feminine ones were girls. There were still boys, but there was just a spectrum there, and I think that understanding has also got.
And then Nigel, you looked at this issue of the family being the basic building block of society.
Indeed.
And we often refer to it as the stabilizing bedrock of society, the underpinning thing. And in many ways, the family is the ultimate example of devolved government. So we've got a situation now where the state has become the primary educator, not the parent. And for me, that's a step too far. That's the state overreaching, if you like, in terms of its involvement with society.
But what I see now is that we're having an issue where cultural Marxism is now being pushed within the school system. Partisan ideology is being pushed, and so when you create a vacuum, something will come in it. And so what was happening, we've eradicated our Judeo-Christian values, and we've sort of it's being pushed out of school, and so something else will come in. And so cultural Marxism comes in, and before you know it, the nuclear family is going to be the thing that, and it's history repeating itself. This has happened before. And so what will happen is the family unit then begins to break down, because now, of course, the family can be made up of all sorts of strange ideas. I mean, there's polyamory now, isn't there? And we have the adoption of gay couples can now adopt children. And I really believe that children need a mother and a father, but they don't recognize those important roles that both a male and a female, husband and wife, can bring.
And again, even from a secular evidence-based perspective, statistically, from a character point of view, from a traits point of view, 2 mums can't be a dad and 2 dads can't be a mum. It just doesn't work out that way. And so really, Katie Faust, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, runs an organization and has written a book, Them Before Us, which posits the opinion that really we should structure society around what's best in the interests of children.
Great.
And clearly, not growing up or intentionally disposing a child to not grow up with its biological mother and father is not in the best interest of that child.
I've got a question to you. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that evidence, which you brought up, which is secular evidence, why is that evidence sort of being thrown out the window? It's not being brought up within government.
Well, it's a very good question. Another interview we had recently was with a gentleman called Balázs Molnár from Hungary, who is a strategic advisor and comes up with the family policies for the Hungarian government. And so they've instituted a lot of world-leading, if you like, family policies to encourage families in lots of different ways, financially and other. And the result is being that more people are getting married, fewer people are getting divorces, more people are having children, fewer children are being involved in the criminal justice system, better educational attainments are being observed, all the sorts of things that you would expect, which the literature says comes about from marriage. In the UK, we look at dreadful crime rates and our response is, let's put 20,000 more police officers on the ground to deal with the crime. Let's not even breathe a word about the fact that if more fathers stayed at home with mothers, you might not have the crime in the first place. For some reason, we don't want to go there.
Yeah, they don't look at the cause.
Yeah.
There's the problem, I think, and we know that one of the major problems is fatherless families. You know, the boy, especially boys, they need their fathers. You know, we've got in the culture, well, you know, a lady has a baby and we just need the mother, but actually, no, those children need a father.
And the difficulty as well in our society is that it's very difficult for anybody to get anything published in this kind of field unless it's entirely complementary. Nobody will dare write it and nobody will be willing to publish it. And that's one of our problems. We can't have a fair and open discussion about these things. And you think at some point, we cannot be bullied as a society into accepting things that are just plain and obviously wrong and bad for children and bad for society.
Absolutely. But there's something, and I mentioned to Sally quite a lot, I noticed over the last 10 years specifically, and I mentioned the BBC here, there's been a narrative that's been drip fed. I mean, the way I look at it, you think every home in the UK has a television, and most people have, and we don't have TV, but most people have a TV. So you're thinking every day a narrative can be drip fed into the home. Because now we're on the back foot, and we need to get back to culture, understanding that the nuclear family is fundamental to a better society.
And that's the question: is how do we get back? I mean, the first stage is not to stop saying what's right and what you believe, and not to put up with being called a transphobe or a homophobe. It's just not the case. I do not hate or fear any homosexual, let alone every homosexual. It's ridiculous to accuse somebody of that. You know, that's what it is in a liberal democracy. But marriage is something unique and special that only a man and a woman can do. And that isn't homophobic.
No, it's not homophobic at all. But of course, these phobia words are banded around because all they want to do is actually demonize us. So if you say, well, I have, my personal view is I have a value in life which believes that marriage is between one man, one woman for life. And of course, what happens is when, specifically actually in the secular world, it causes a real offence And that's where we've received, real depth of hatred. And then you're labeled transphobic, homophobic, all those things. And I said, well, actually, no, I love all people, actually. Whatever color skin you are, whatever sexual orientation you are, I still show respect, kindness, and love. But then if I say to someone, well, do you agree with same-sex marriage? I say, well, no, I don't, because my personal view is that from a biblical perspective, marriage is between one man and one woman for life. And they get so angry. I'm like, well, why are you getting so angry? That's my personal view, but I don't show any hatred towards you. But we received, haven't we? The response is real anger. And then you get that sort of, they'll say, well, you're intolerant. You probably had it. You're unloving, intolerant, and people like us should be deplatformed.
What's interesting is that the minority are the loudest and the majority are the quiet, because we know, even from the legal centre, there have been parents that have shown so concerns in their own schools, but they are so scared to say anything. We're in a democratic society. We should be able to freely talk about these things and about different opinions, but it is because people are just labeling transphobic and you're bigoted, you're hateful, and it just shuts that conversation down. And so we do need to have more people, basically more people who are willing to speak out.
More people who are willing to speak out. Sally, you're absolutely right. More people who are willing to speak out, and more people who are willing to get involved in the process. Decisions are often made by people who are in the room. So who are the school governors? Who are the people that turn up to local trust health boards? Who are the volunteers and the people that get involved with local charities and local groups like that? We need more people to do that. My local constituency here in North Cardiff, where I live, there's, whichever party you choose, there's about 13 to 15 people who choose the candidates that are going to be presented to the population. That's a very small number of people. Now, we need more people getting involved in that process. Groups of people, so they don't feel alone, they don't feel threatened. Groups of people just going along, not as Christians or not as other faiths or not as no faiths, but just going along with sensible views and saying, well, actually, now there's a number of us who are going to inject some sensible views, and we're willing not to succumb to the bullying of those who will shout us down. We're going to use our democratic process, and we're going to get involved, and we're going to pick candidates that we think are more palatable to everybody, not just a vocal minority.
I agree. In fact, there is an organisation. Have you heard of the Wilberforce Academy?
Yep.
You have, yeah. And that's what that is all about.
Good shout out. Let's advertise that. So if there's anybody here who's watching, who's I think it's kind of like young professionals, students, young professionals, early out in their career, a wonderful, and it's about September time, a wonderful week away, an intensive period of just examining the culture, examining our response to the culture, and hearing some wonderful gifted speakers. Just look at Wilberforce Academy, look it up online, you're bound to find it. If you know any young people that would fit in that category that you think would want to apply, let them know. It's a wonderful thing that takes place, usually in one of the Oxford colleges, who then appear on the news because they've been forced into saying, we're sorry that we had such a thing in our college. But, so what does the future hold? I suppose you're just sitting around and waiting for the outcome of the judicial review?
We are at the moment, obviously, we're doing quite a few media interviews at the moment. Yes, we're waiting on to see what happens in the judicial review in a sort of 3 to 6 months. And it would just also be interesting to see how the public react to this. I'm yet to hear anything from the Church of England, from the Synod. I haven't heard anything. I'm hoping they might want to sort of start thinking about this and saying something. Because this is a landmark challenge. It really is a landmark challenge now.
That's another interesting point you raise, Nigel, about the public reacting. Because quite often the public don't react, but when we do have consultations on these issues, we've had consultations in Wales about the relationships and sex education curriculum and changes and taking away parental rights withdrawal. And overwhelmingly, on the first consultation, the public said, no, we don't want those changes. So they held the consultation again. Let's ask the same question again, and hopefully on a shorter timescale and not make it quite so public, and maybe won't get, but again, you know, the public said, no, we don't want these changes, but they did it anyway.
Yes.
So, you know, it is difficult, isn't it, really? Has this changed you as individuals?
Yes, it has. I think it's made us more resilient. When 4.5 years ago, when we first decided to go public, it was a shock. It was a shock. I mean, if we could just paint the picture of who we're just ordinary people who live by the beach. We enjoy windsurfing and kite surfing and outdoor life, that sort of thing. We have a wonderful marriage and 2 lovely boys. Just want a quiet life, really. I really want a quiet life. But there was that incredible conviction in my heart, and you know, wasn't there, that we felt we couldn't let this go. This is fundamentally important. And once you let the cat out of the bag, you put your head above the parapet and you challenge it, it is life-changing. It was life-changing in that there are people out there in the community who despise you. And that will be probably till the day I die.
Some
you don't want to talk.
Relationships have changed, haven't they?
Relationships have changed.
We've got some good relationships from it as well, but
But even in Christian circles, we were just staggered at the silence. And that's even church that we used to attend years ago. There were very few Christians that stood with us. And it was a very lonely place. And actually, for me personally, I'm quite a sensitive, but I found that very hurtful. I just could not understand it, because to me, it was just blatantly obvious that this transgender ideology pushed on little boys and girls. It was just so wrong.
That was something that we didn't expect, is it?
We didn't expect that.
We expected
the world to hate us, but we didn't expect the church to turn against us. And I remember writing a letter to Justin Welby. And I remember also watching him on RBC News when he was being interviewed. And I remember Nick Ferrari said, well, who do you support? Do you support Nigel and Sally Rowe? Or do you support the parents of the child who is transitioning? And Justin said, I support the parents who are transitioning. And I thought, are you not standing with your fellow brethren? It was just shocking. I just couldn't believe it. But over 4 years, but after the media interviews and the very negative behaviour of the journalists, you get used to it, and you kind of expect it. And this time round, I was expecting it again. And to be honest with you, there has been a shift, and it's not hostile like it was before.
There's a lot more people who
I think
supporting.
A lot more of the public are supporting, and I think journalists have realised there's something going on here. And I think people have also, as they've got to know us, hopefully through interviews, that we're not hateful, negative.
You're lovely people.
We're not transphobic, homophobic, whatever. We're just people that have a passion for the truth, and the truth is we want to see children protected.
I've taken up a lot of your time, and for those of you who are watching, we're recording this in the evening because Nigel's a working guy, and after the kids have gone to bed, so they both had a really busy day, and I'm so grateful for the time that you've given us, and it's just been a joy to get to know you a bit better, and for people to find out about you. We'll be emailing this out to an awful lot of people, and lots of people will come and watch it. I want to thank you for just being brave enough to stand back then, because a lot of people, and dare I say the majority of us, would have caved. I would have thought, I don't need this hassle. I don't want my child to have this hassle in school. It's much easier just to not say anything. But you didn't do that. You said something, and hopefully you'll inspire lots of others. And while we intend to hold public meetings, and we go to organizations quite regularly to give talks, and we need to get somewhere near where you guys live so we can have you along and join in and do a talk with us. And hopefully, when the judicial review is published in a few months' time, perhaps we'll have you back and you can tell us how it's all gone.
That'd be great.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Can
much.
I thank you both for your time? Thank you very, very much, Nigel and Sally Rowe.
Thank you. Thank you.